Good evening and welcome, everybody. The special meeting of the Town Council of February 13th, 2024 is now called to order. May I have a roll call?
Councilmember Ista?
Here.
Councilmember Ennie?
Here.
Councilmember Moore?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hudas?
Here.
Mayor Badami?
Here. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to open it up for verbal communications, and verbal communications would be limited to the item that's listed on the agenda, which is our strategic priorities. I have 2 speaker cards, and I will call Jay Play to the podium.
Good evening, members. I want to thank everybody for meeting with us over the past month regarding the SB 9 setback rule for massing. I would just ask that you would, when the priorities do come up to make that change, that it would be addressed and possibly the Planning Commission would be able to make the change. Spoken extensively with Ryan Safdie about this, and Ryan believes it would be a straightforward change to make this modification to the ordinance. I've enclosed a letter along with the plans again for you guys, and just would ask your consideration in this and think it would be a positive step for architecture of the town and my ability as an architect to deliver a quality product and project for my clients. So, and Patrick Mock will speak now. His house is the one that has led to all this.
Thank you. I see no hands up for questions, so you still have a little bit of time if you'd like to talk a little more. Otherwise, I'll call Patrick up. Okay. Patrick Mock.
Hi, good evening, council members. Again, I would like to thank everyone as well that took the time out over the past month to meet with Jay and I. Our home has been carefully and thoughtfully designed to meet the needs of my family as well as our neighbors, the privacy concerns, and whatnot. We believe that modifying the step back requirement in the way that we propose clearly meets the intent of the SB 9 ordinance in reducing the bulk, the mass, and the privacy concerns in the neighborhood. At the same time, allowing us to design a home that meets the needs of our family, but also aesthetically helps with the neighborhood aesthetics. Again, thank you for your time and consideration. Feel free to let us know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Joe Enns. Sorry, I'm sorry. Councilmember Ristow, Mr. Mock, if you could come back to the podium.
I have a question for staff.
Okay, so you can stay there. Yes.
Thank you. Is this item before us tonight, or is this when will we be considering or reconsidering our SB 9 ordinance?
One of the items tonight is the prioritization and identification of ordinances. So if this is something of interest, you would add it to your list and then determine its rank.
Okay, so just in terms of ranking. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Enns, please come to the podium.
Tickled for this opportunity. Anytime I can give before you all, I hold you very high regard. I don't even know why I'm here. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm saying things are great here, and the homeless people are really doing well. This is what I really want to talk about. I'm here representing Friends of the Lost Gatos Creek. I'm a community organizer, and I'm going to be working with the ex-mayor, Mariko, and she's an EPA person. I'm serious about it. So I get up here, I'm dumbfounded. I'm going, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just here because I'm getting a couple minutes of free time to talk about the creek, that's the beautiful creek, and the water, and the actual aspects of the biology and everything there. And this is what I'm excited about. I get to work with these homeless people who are actually getting it together. I get up here, I'm all giddy, and then I talk to Mr. Todd over here. I love your police, they're doing great. And we got a great police chief, Jamie's great. I'm really excited about that, I know you all are. So we're all on the same page. It's just talking about it, and the more people that get involved in the government here, I know you've dealt with that, Maria Stowe, and the bride program, I got people interested in that. Becoming certified caregivers, the longer I speak here, the more serious I can get. because it's serious stuff, but it's fun when it all starts unfolding perfectly, and then people's lives start changing, and then you're all kind of together on the same page. That same page thing is a theme I'm seeing a lot, and it's coincidental, synchronous. I'm going to leave you with this. Einstein said, "Everything you got to see everything in life is a miracle, or everything's not." And I love Albert. Yeah, okay, I got another minute to talk about Albert Einstein. You want your kids to be intelligent? Read them fairy tales. You want to be more intelligent? Read them more fairy tales. How could this guy come up with this, do all that great thinking, and then be so childlike and innocent in his simplicity? It looked at the joy of living. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Enns. Would anybody in the audience like to speak to us on this item? See no one come forward. I'm going to look to see if we have any hands raised on Zoom.
Yes, we have two hands raised on Zoom.
Okay.
Nicole?
Nicole, welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good evening and thank you, Honorable Los Gatos City Council members. My name is Nicole and I'm part of Saratoga High School's Environmental Action Club. I live in Saratoga and I'm a junior at Saratoga High School. According to the EPA, the most potent source of water pollution is urban runoff. Artificial turf is a major contributor to this problem, polluting waterways with hundreds of pounds of PFAS and plastics per year per field. In most plastic turfs, not only are the blades itself made of plastic, but so are the little pebbles that are spread out between the plastic blades of the turf. These pebbles are actually cut up pellets of rubber tires, which are non-biodegradable. Activity on artificial turf leads to its plastic content ending up in various rivers or waterways, where they poison wildlife and the people that use that water. I still remember when I was taking part in my school's color guard in PE. After running around for mere minutes, I'd already gotten handfuls of rubber pellets stuck in my shoes, which just goes to show how easily the plastic can spread. In fact, one report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found PFAS in the blood of 97% of Americans. In addition, these PFAS can lead to cancer, autoimmune diseases, severe damage to organs, and birth defects. Just look at the case where 6 baseball players for the Philadelphia Phillies who played on artificial turf all contracted and died from glioma, a rare brain cancer. Plastics contain many other harmful chemicals as well, which may cause chemical burns to the lungs, lead to lung damage, and affect our body's nervous system. The toxicity of artificial turf and its virus-like ability to spread are what make it such a huge concern. This is just one of many reasons why action has already been taken to address this issue in other cities. In late 2022, Boston banned artificial turf in parks. Millbury and San Mateo County also established the interim ordinance, a moratorium banning the installation of artificial turf and synthetic grass. This moratorium has since evolved into a permanent ordinance and now completely bans the installation of artificial turf. For the immense health and safety concern, we hope you reconsider the use of artificial turf when renovating the Creekside sports field and instead look to natural grass. Investing more money into artificial turf is a waste, especially considering its short lifespan and toxic properties. So we ask you to please not locate any more money into artificial turf installation. Thank you for listening and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nicole. Councilmember Hudes, Vice Mayor Hudes.
Thank you, and thank you for your thoughts about this topic. When I think about artificial turf, it seems like it could be on private property or it could be on public property, which would be either town-owned or the schools or potentially other agencies. Have you looked at where artificial turf currently exists in Los Gatos so we can focus consideration of this a little bit? Is it on the school property? Is it on town-owned property? I'm aware of the soccer field, but are there others? And where is the concern? Is it private, public, and which public? Thanks.
Hello. Yeah. So basically, I believe the Creekside Sports Complex right now has artificial turf fields, and they're planning on, you're planning on adding to $500,000 to the budget in order to replace those turf fields, since their lifespan is running short soon. And I know that there's also some private properties around the city that do have artificial turf. And either way, it's still effective to talk about like a discussion of the harms of artificial turf, because just last year, actually, the California legislation passed a bill called SB 676, which is basically, it was a bill from the Senate, which was signed by Governor Newsom, and it now allows cities and counties to ban the installation of artificial turf, not only on like public city property, but also on private homes and private property too. So either way, I feel like it would be definitely important to look at the harms of artificial turf and consider a moratorium such as Millbrae or Boston.
Thank you. You've obviously done a lot of work on this. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Next speaker.
Nahia?
Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, okay. Hi, my name is Neha, and I'm a junior and a part of Saratoga High School's Environmental Action Club. And like mentioned before, I am here to consider the prioritization of real grass over artificial turf for the Creekside Sports Park. So PFAS are found in all samples of artificial turf. PFAS, commonly known as forever chemicals, are resistant to breaking down. And according to the Santa Clara County Medical Association, PFAS bioaccumulates in food chains and has contaminated water supplies throughout the nation. Some health risks include endocrine disruption, adverse effects on liver and thyroid, metabolic effects, and more. In the process of making turf, the tire bits that are ingrained in the turf expose workers in the tire industry to more than 50 toxic chemicals. These tires and their chemicals can also cause numerous health effects and various types of cancers. Artificial turf also has a problem with heat. Turf absorbs and retains heat, resulting in significantly higher temperatures than the surrounding environment. Turf fields can rise to temperatures 40 to 60 degrees higher than living grass. In Utah, after an athlete suffered from a heat burn from turf, BYU performed a study on artificial turf and found that artificial turf temperature was 87 degrees hotter than natural grass. Even with moderate air temperatures, artificial turf fields can become heat islands, and these higher temperatures can cause stroke, heat exhaustion, poor athletic performance, skin burns, making these fields potentially unusable under certain weather conditions. And with the support of SB 676 and considering the factors listed above, I do feel like we should prioritize the use of real grass. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further hands on Zoom?
Yes, one more. Pamela?
Welcome, Pamela.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to echo the sentiments of Neha and Nicole. I'm not sure if I missed anybody else, but I'm a parent in Los Gatos, and I'm speaking regarding the strategic plan, and I'd like to recommend that the discussion around limiting or banning artificial turf be highlighted for consideration in the 24-26 timeline, and also increased public education in the interim would be helpful. It's a pressing matter as people are inclined to install artificial turf as a drought-saving measure, particularly in California, but the reality is that artificial turf is not going to help us when we enter a drought period again. The section 6.14 implementation programs for the general plan has both program A, water efficient landscape ordinance, and program C, artificial turf. And these kind of go hand in hand because when you talk about water efficient landscapes, a lot of people think artificial turf, but even Valley Water has an artificial turf fact sheet saying that they don't recommend artificial turf. In town, I've seen artificial turf used at gas station landscaping, which is ironic because it's a petrochemical plastic. I've seen it used for front yards that are not used, and it's just because residents want something green. They don't have time to maintain their yard, and they're not really thinking about it usually. But what they aren't thinking about is the heat that's emitted, the shedding of microplastic fibers over time, the potential flow of plastic bits and chemicals into storm drains, and that when it comes time to replace it, where does it go? There's no effective recycling right now. It also emits greenhouse gases over the lifetime of the product. Many think residential and commercial uses for landscaping don't use tire crumb rubber, and so it's not that bad, but the artificial turf industry is really good at greenwashing their products. The reality is the artificial turf industry improves, quote unquote, their products by adding more unregulated chemicals to improve the UV protection, fire retardants, colorants, and other chemicals to make it softer or whatever they're touting at the time. I wanted to commend the Saratoga High School Environmental Club students for their efforts, and remind everybody that we need to consider the youth and what decisions we make today will affect them in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional hands on Zoom?
There are no more hands raised on Zoom.
No more hands, no more speaker cards. I'm going to close public comment. And at this time, we're going to move to other business, which is to affirm and/or refine existing strategic priorities and determine the priorities for new ordinances. And I'm going to look to Ms. Pravetti to make an introduction for our special guest tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We appreciate your attention and coming together yet again for this important topic. Tonight, I'm very honored to reintroduce you to Dr. Sean Spano, who you've worked with before. Sean is Professor Emeritus at San Jose State University, teaching in the Department of Communications, and has extensive experience facilitating local government and other organizations in various retreats and other settings. So he's going to help us tonight. You do have a staff memo before you. I'm just going to outline some of the key attachments, and then I'll turn it over to Sean, who will lead you through the process as it is described in the memo. As we do every year, our strategic priorities are really important. It's one of our first steps towards our budget making. It helps us identify those policy areas that are of key importance to the town and to the town council. In addition, we have a lot of work that is happening day in and day out. As you know, our staff work very hard in all sorts of areas: public safety, quality of life, community character, quality public infrastructure. Staff is very busy trying to maintain this wonderful place that we call Los Gatos. Unfortunately, our resources are stretched very thin, so we really don't have capacity for big new priorities. However, refinements and any other kind of, if you want to take one off the list and to make room for another one, that's certainly an idea. Over the past few years, as shown in attachment 1, our council has been really interested in the big picture, big ideas. And so that's why we've been calling them ongoing strategic priorities in the area of safety, prudent financial management, traffic and transportation, as well as quality of life. We have accomplished quite a bit in the last year, as documented in the staff report. And attachment 4 is a refined version of the strategic priorities as a starting point for your conversation tonight, where we have removed the items that have been completed or has essentially become part of the way we do business. And I think community policing is an excellent example of council made that a strategic priority a couple of years ago. And I'm very proud of our police department and how they've really re-embraced community policing and have done an outstanding job working with our public, getting to know everyone, solving crimes, and having an extensive track record of really great performance in the midst of some, challenging resource constraints, as you've heard. Attachment 2 is something new. In the past, we've provided to council a work plan of all the things that each department is doing. This year, we took a slightly different approach, and we took each of the council's 6 core goals. These have been adopted and reaffirmed over the years, and most recently redefined in 2022 by the council. And on the left-hand column for each of the core goals, you'll see key projects and initiatives. These are items that council has identified in past council meetings as being priority activities, and so we want those to be acknowledged, as well as some metrics. Council has expressed terrific interest in making sure that we're measuring the things that matter. So for each core goal, you will see metrics to go with it. And again, it's a starting point, but again, I think it's very important for the council and our public to know that we have time series data in our budgets every year. And so this is a snapshot of how are we doing with our 911 calls, our priority calls, how many cases are we investigating, in terms of infrastructure, how many work orders are we doing? And when you look at the magnitude of work that a teeny tiny little team is doing, 2,576 work orders, it's really astounding, in many respects. When we move into community character, you'll see that we've got tremendous interest in our downtown parking and olive zone employee parking permits. We've processed huge numbers of permits to really help with investments in our community. We do a lot with respect to fiscal stability, and I know that will be a future conversation. And in terms of civic engagement, our council meetings are a form of that civic engagement, as well as all of our boards and commissions, all of the library visits, library programming, and you'll see we have hundreds of thousands of people who enjoy our library. So we wanted to begin to document some of those measures. It's really background information and context for your conversation around strategic priorities. But I think it's very important to recognize the vast amount of work that is being accomplished by our mighty team here in Los Gatos on behalf of the Los Gatos community. But even with that, there are these important initiatives that we can continue to advance. I'm available for questions, but also I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Spano, who will then lead you through our process. Thank you.
Very, very good. Thank you, Town Manager Prevetti, Mayor Badami, council members. It's a pleasure being here with you this evening. I'm going to take just a couple minutes and get us organized for how we'll spend our time together. You have, as the town manager mentioned, you have the memo, the agenda report in front of you. What is the purpose of tonight? Tonight's a very important meeting as you establish your strategic priorities for the 2024-2026 time period. And we have one primary purpose tonight, actually with 2 parts to it. Affirm and or refine existing strategic priorities, part 1, and part 2, determine the priorities for new ordinances. In order to accomplish that 2-part purpose, we'll have a very simple agenda. We're going to start with a warm-up exercise in just a minute, and I'll ask you all, what are the 1 or 2 top accomplishments in the town in the past year? This is your perception of what those 1 or 2 accomplishments are. You just heard that in the staff report, there's a list of accomplishments on page 5. Don't feel like you need to select from that list. You may see some other accomplishment that rises to the level of being the top 1 or 2. That will be a relatively quick warm-up exercise, and then we will move into the ordinances, and the town attorney Whalen, will walk you through maybe a little bit about the ordinances that were accomplished last year. You have that in your report, but the focus here moving forward, what are the ordinances that you want the attorney to be working on in the coming year, and we'll prioritize those. She started the list, and we'll refer to the report on that. We'll take a couple minutes, the third part of the agenda, we'll take a couple minutes and review the strategic priorities from last year. If you have any questions about the status of the priorities and the objectives and work plans underneath that, if you have any questions, want to know the status of that, please ask away. That's what that review is designed to do. And then we'll conclude tonight with the fourth part of the agenda, which is really important, which is for you all to affirm and or refine the strategic priorities for the next iteration, the 2024-2026 time period. So with that said, how's that sound as an agenda, as a way to work through our process this evening? With that said, let's start the accomplishments here. So real quick, 1 or 2, what do you see as the 1 or 2 top accomplishments? And again, you can see on page 5 the list of accomplishments that the town manager has put together. Council Member Risto, would you like to get us started?
Follow.
Oh, Pat.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. We.
Can we take a break?
All right. Okay. I'm gonna.
Can we take a break?
Thank you. We're gonna take a 5-minute break. Thank you.
I'm doing a cancel. I could have started there.
Yeah, because I don't know.
Okay, council is back from recess, and just to clarify the process, our facilitator is Dr. Spano, and he will be moderating the meeting going forward. Typically, the mayor moderates the meeting and calls on people, but I just want to clear the air that Dr. Spano will be calling on council members as they raise their hands in whatever order, but it will be up to you to call on us. So if you could still proceed, Dr. Spano, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Badami, and we will be informal this evening, and I probably should have articulated that at the outset. So we are in council chambers, but this is not a formal council meeting in the sense of the mayor leading as the presiding officer. So we're going to be informal this evening, and if you raise your hand, then I'll just call on you to speak, and that's how we can proceed this evening and determine who wants to speak. And the reason why I called on Councilmember Risto was because she raised her hand. Would you like to go? And we're on accomplishments, the top 1 or 2 accomplishments.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor, for clarifying the process. I appreciate it. So, when I saw this question, I thought, wow, in terms of things we took big steps on last year, I thought of quite a few things. But when I think about accomplishments, I think of big steps that were completed. And so the first one that popped into mind was the Parklet program completion, because that really does seem to have a bow on it. That started a couple of councils ago. It was interdepartmental. When I've been to the meetings and seen who's worked on it, that was part of community development and Parks and Public Works and economic vitality and the police department. It felt like it took so many different moving parts to put something together that actually is essentially, it's transformational to the downtown. And it actually has served as a model for other towns and cities. I have people from other cities constantly asking how we did it. I'm happy to refer them to our staff, but it was a collaborative effort, and it really has made a significant difference. So I view that as an accomplishment. The other one, we're not done, but the giant leap, these are both things that I've lived here a long time, and the Parklet program, I didn't understand why we didn't have outdoor dining, and all of a sudden we're here. Not all of a sudden, but we are here. The other is the enhanced services for our unhoused and the hotel program. And we're not there, but we are in a place serving our unhoused that I never envisioned even 3 years ago. And so with the partnership of our faith communities and with assistance from our outside agencies and our town staff, pulling all that together, we've made a giant step. So those are the 2 that stuck out for me.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. Who'd like to go next? Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. So I had the same kind of, it's a big question. This is not one of my 2 things, so I'm cheating a little bit. But I think the first one that I thought of was keeping the lights on and responding to all of the kind of day-to-day things that the town does. There are emergencies and weather events and all of these things that I think it's really impressive. That I think that's really, in the report talking about the kind of I think it's 90-10 ratio of government here, where 90% of the work that the town's doing is just kind of ongoing work that the hardworking folks of the town of Los Gatos do every day. So I think genuinely that's amazing, because it's not easy. My 2 that I'll highlight are first, one is the same as Councilmember Risto's and might not be a surprise, is that the really innovative work to address the needs of our homeless residents. I actually somewhat similarly to the comments on the Parklet program, I think Los Gatos is doing something really unique to address homelessness as a small municipality, and I think it's something that not a lot of other cities are trying, and I think we really have an incredible opportunity to keep innovating and keep doing more for our folks, to really be a model for the rest of the West Valley cities, especially when you have the behemoth of San Jose next to us, which has the 3rd or 4th largest homeless population in the country, and more difficult fact to grapple with is that San Jose has by far the highest youth homeless population, which means that problem is going to keep getting worse the less we address it. So I think that's really incredible. Really, really proud of the incredibly hard work and innovation that staff has done there. The second one is the completion of the DEI plan and the creation of the DEI commission. Again, not a lot of municipalities have DEI commissions. I think that that's a really exciting thing. And, just tuning into some of the meetings already, there's a lot of good work getting done and there's a lot more work to do. Spending some time with some of the folks in that commission, there's a ton of great energy. And I think it's going to really continue the work that we started on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So big thank you to the whole team for everything that has been done the past year.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Moore, Mayor Badami.
Thank you. I would say the adoption of the senior roadmap, that was quite a comprehensive program. We had a lot of brilliant minds that put this map together. It will take some time to implement all the programs, but we have an aging population. I think that it's 30% of Los Gatos is considered seniors. If not 30%, we're getting very close to that. My second item that I would say would be the completion also of the parking lot program, or parklets, excuse me. That encompassed many components of our core values. I work downtown. I can attest to the success of the program. It's added so much community vitality as well as economic vitality to our community. And it's great to see so many happy faces joining together for a meal, glass of wine, cup of coffee. And that's what we like to see in Los Gatos, happy faces. So those are my two.
Excellent, thank you. Councilmember Rennie.
So my 1 and 2 were taken, but I wrote down 4 just in case. That's what happens when you're down this end of it. So my number 1 was parklets, and 2 I had senior roadmap. So the number 3 I had was stabilizing our police department and our dispatch. It wasn't long ago that we were down to 3 dispatchers when we need 8. So I think we're maybe at 7 now. We had a lot of turnover in our police department with a lot of retirements, and so we've been hiring and training, and I really feel like the police department is on much better footing than it was at 1 to 2 years ago. So I'd put that as a big accomplishment. I think we have a little more work, a few more retirements, but I think that was a huge move forward last year. And then the number 4 on mine was the ribbon cutting in the beginning of the bridge construction connecting Highway 9 to the Creek Trail. It's something we've been talking about for years and years and years, it seems like. It takes lots of planning and designing and voting for dollars to get planning and designing done. And we finally finished all the planning and designing, and we've actually started building something. So I'd call that an accomplishment that we've actually started building something.
Very good, excellent. Thank you. And Vice Mayor Hudis.
I can't help myself on the older adults initiatives that we've started. I wanted to go maybe a little deeper on it and say that this year, 2023, we really started working on the roadmap and sorted out how to address it with our Community Health and Services Commission, and in a major way established a community foundation for older adults to thrive that works alongside and is not stepping on toes, but actually being synergistic with the town commission and town services. And it's been very gratifying to see that. I would also note that having attended some regional meetings and some other meetings, Cal Cities and others, people, for a town that was struggling with this, where our population was growing and our services were declining significantly, now people are saying, you guys have your act together. What are you doing? How can we learn from that? How can we copy that? So I think it's very, very gratifying. There's been a lot of progress in that area.
Excellent, very good. I know that was a tough assignment to only pick 1 or 2 when you have so many accomplishments to choose from, and Councilmember Rennie had some backups there, which I'm sure were easy to identify. We are done with agenda item number 1, and we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is to prioritize the ordinances for the coming year. And if you have any questions about any of the ordinances from last year, the Attorney Whalen is here. And I'll get my page numbers straight here. There are 2 page numbers. There's the page numbers at the top, and then there's the electronic copy. So let me get my page numbers correct here. The ordinances that were accomplished last year are on the bottom of page 4, if you look at the page numbers at the top. And then the ordinances, potential ordinances for the coming year are on page 5. And so let me turn it over to Attorney Whalen to walk you through the ordinances and what she has planned, and then we'll hear from council.
Good evening. So to recap, last year the Town Council adopted an accessory dwelling unit ordinance, an SB 9 ordinance that addresses urban lot splits and duplexes, a concealed carry weapons ordinance that updated the town's process for issuing concealed carry weapons permits, and in conjunction with that, a sensitive places ordinance that prohibited the concealed carry of weapons at a list of sensitive places, an e-bike ordinance, and last but not least, an update to the bingo ordinance. For this year, there's 4 ordinances that I'd like to recommend that the Town Council consider, and I'm definitely here to have input from the council on other ordinances to add to that list. The first ordinance that will be coming to you is an assign ordinance update. That's going to the Planning Commission on February 28th for a recommendation to the Town Council. And the goal with that ordinance update is to bring the ordinance in line with recent case law that prohibits content-based regulation, meaning that you have to read the content of the sign in order to determine whether or not it's permitted. And so the revisions that will be coming to you will be to remove the content-based regulations and to address signage, temporary signage located in medians and along the public right-of-way. Are there any questions on the sign ordinance update? Okay. Another ordinance that I'd like to recommend that the council consider is an ordinance addressing or establishing free speech zones in the town. The town has recently received a number of applications for events held on weekends that involve demonstrations, and the demonstrations involve physical items that are placed in public parks for, probably about a 4-hour period of time. And in my view, it would be helpful if the town had designated free speech zones in the town where demonstrations such as that can be accommodated. There are a number of other cities that have similar ordinances, and I think it would be helpful to the town in processing these applications. Are there any questions on that? Yes.
Yeah, so I was surprised to see this on here. I need to understand how it became a priority. You explained a little bit how it became a priority, but what problem are we trying to solve here in town, and will this enhance or actually inhibit free speech?
So with we've only observed 2 or 3 events recently, but what's occurred is the park downtown has been sort of taken over by the demonstrations, and then other people aren't able to use the park. And so it would be helpful if the free speech zone were in an area that was less congested, and then other people can use the park and also see the demonstration.
So just one event that we can describe, and I think I know which one. I happened to come across it. It just seems like to make this a priority when we've only had one, and I thought it was a peaceful demonstration, by the way. I'm just thinking we might be inviting a problem that may complicate legal issues going forward. I'll turn it over to Vice Mayor Hudes.
Yeah, thank you. It seems like there's some aspect of this that might be productive, but I guess in reading it as it's on the page here, I would be interested in understanding whether there have been court challenges to this. It seems like this could raise constitutional issues, and is there, how widely accepted is this approach as it's described, or would we, end up at the Supreme Court on something like this?
I believe it's fairly widely accepted because the gist of the case law is that so long as there is an avenue for people to demonstrate, as long as there's one or two locations where the demonstrations can occur, the town won't have impeded those free speech rights. Yes.
I can think of a number of counter arguments to that. So before providing strong support for that one, I would really need to understand the landscape of this this type of approach.
Yeah, I have some issues with it as well, and I hate daring into free speech issues. I think we just invite problems, and again, whether it enhances or inhibits. But I'm just wondering if this is better suited for a bigger municipality, ones that maybe have college campuses. I mean, I don't know of any jurisdictions around here. I'd be interested to see, does Saratoga, Campbell, Los Altos have this particular ordinance? I'm just really hesitant on prioritizing this or even addressing it till we really feel a need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, well, my thought is, one, this could be very timely because with elections coming up, we do know that disproportionately from other local jurisdictions, we seem to get more, we seem to attract more public free speech events than other municipalities on all sides. So what I was curious about is if we did have a free speech zone or two of them, is that encouragement toward going there, or does that mean because we have one, we can prohibit an event in a non-free speech zone area?
It means that the demonstrations that involve placing physical items in the park would be limited to those specified zones. Protests can still be held anywhere, but those would be the areas where items could be placed in the park.
Okay, so if I can continue. So this sounds like what we would be addressing is somebody essentially setting up an event. I mean, I personally think it would be worth, I don't know that we would necessarily go through with it, but I think it would be worth learning more about it and seeing what it could look like and understanding what other communities have for, as you're describing it, it's not a spontaneous protest or it's not a group of people standing in the park and having a protest, but it's actually setting up some type of infrastructure and creating an event. And I do think that our park plaza, for example, is highly visible, but it's also really crowded. And if someone decided to do that on a Sunday, that would be a huge impact on the families and the farmers market and other things. So I'm interested in learning more about this. So I think it's worth keeping on the list personally.
First calling, yeah. So back to the mayor's question about what problem are we trying to solve? I heard your answer, but it didn't sound like a big problem. Is there more implications for staff that they had to spend a lot more time or effort? I think you mentioned four times this occurred in 1 year, or
it's been 2 or 3 since September of last year.
And it was 4 hours of sort of non-use of the park by other people.
Yeah, and from staff's perspective, it's a little bit. And I'm happy to move this to the end of the list and provide more information. But from staff's perspective, it was a little bit of a square peg in a round hole because staff issued special events permits for these demonstrations, and it wasn't like the perfect solution for the request.
Okay, and I would think if I was trying to organize a demonstration, the Plaza Park would be the perfect place because there'd be people to see the demonstration. Right? If I'm trying to plan out for free speech perspective, it's exactly where I would put it. If I'm trying to stick them so that they're not seen and ignored, which is really against free speech, I'd put them somewhere else. So I'm also struggling with whether it's a big enough problem to take on kind of a thorny problem.
One thing, and I appreciate the discussion, and obviously there are other ordinances for all of you to prioritize. We would be happy to put together some information. We did, as our town attorney mentioned, we use the mechanisms that we have for free speech permits now to enable activities to occur. But we did find that when we were trying to protect our town assets and infrastructure, that we didn't have all the tools for that protection. So that's really what we're trying to get at, is how we can allow for our parks or a portion of our park to be used for this purpose, but to do it in such a way that that we also have accountability.
Okay, I still would like to get some clarification because I'm big on public safety. So when you mention physical items that are being placed in these areas, I get we might have signs, but I mean, are we worried about suitcases that might have bombs in it? I mean, if you could kind of elaborate on what type of physical items that we're concerned about.
For instance, in one instance, the plan was to have shoes spread out throughout the park. And then in another instance, it was weighted balloons. And so the objects aren't in and of themselves dangerous. It's just it precludes other people from using the park at the same time.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the more I hear about it, the less excited I am about it. I was there with the shoe demonstration, and I thought it was a very strong expression of free speech that did not impinge on other people's rights at all. It was extremely peaceful, and it carried a very, very powerful message. And the thing with free speech is that it makes some people uncomfortable, and that's not the First Amendment, is to keep people from being uncomfortable. So if we're going to proceed with this, I would prefer more work done even on the title, because I think the title as it stands, talking about demonstrations and things, when in fact it seems like the bigger issue was with materials. So I'm less enthusiastic about it, and I think if we do put it on the list, we probably ought to define better, in more words, what we intend to be exploring.
Councilmember Risto?
Thank you. I mean, I think we're not at the prioritization step yet. I think we were just learning what the ordinance was. So it sounds like we have a lot more questions about it, but when we get to prioritization, I think I have a sense where I'm going with this. Thank you.
Very good. Continue on. Unless there are any other questions on this ordinance, proposed ordinance? Yes, Mayor Badami.
Well, I didn't really have a question on the ordinance. I think at some point we got to make a motion on the priorities, but I would say I'm not really interested in it at all. I think we can utilize our town attorney's time in other ways, but that's my opinion.
Okay. Unless there's any, go ahead, Councilmember.
We're
Rainey.
still on ordinances, right? Not just,
yes.
just this specific one. So there was a suggestion to update SB 9 again to help the architects. And I see SB 9 was on our completed list from last year. It is kind of a new concept, and sometimes you need to adjust new concepts. I have seen what he has in his folder. It seems like a good idea to, almost in a streamlining sense, that he can, as he said, create a quality product with a little help nudging in the adjustment of the SB 9 ordinance. So think it's an okay idea to look at that again if others are interested.
Go ahead, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're still going down the proposed ordinances, but I guess while we're talking about SB9, I would be very much in favor of making the adjustment that the architect proposed. I think it's minor, and I think looking at kind of how it's impacting projects, I think I don't think our ordinance was ill-intended in any way. I think that the spirit of the ordinance would probably allow for what the architect was proposing. So I think that's also something that I'd be very interested in. And I think it would also be a pretty quick one.
Yes, Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. Similarly, I was going to wait until we went through all the ordinances on the list to start adding one, but since that has been broached, I'm also supportive. It doesn't look like, I hope it doesn't look like it will take a lot of extra work, and I think I would like to see that added to the list and potentially moved toward the top.
Very good. Councilmember Vice Mayor Hudas?
I don't know if we're going to be taking motions on it, but I wanted to agree that this change seems to be logical and seems to actually fix something, an issue that we created unintentionally. And so I'd be supportive of putting some effort into the SB9.
Excellent. Very good.
I would as well, just to chime in. And at this point, too, I'm interested in Ms. Whelan explaining and elaborating on the remaining two items, which is the peddler ordinance and the organic waste ordinance.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So the town has a very old peddler and solicitor ordinance that regulates people who sell merchandise door to door or on the street. And over the past couple of years, the state has enacted several pieces of legislation affecting street vending. And so I'd like to spend some time bringing the town's peddler ordinance into conformance with current state law for street vendors.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's great. I've seen what some of those state law changes are, and I think they make a lot of sense. I think the street vendors already know about these changes. We've been seeing some like hot dog stands and things in the town, which I think is great. I think those are great things for economic vitality. And I think, I don't know if this is like a technical term or whatever, but I feel like peddler is like a really outdated term. So maybe we can use more of the street vendor language because I think I'd like to, I think it's great. We have street vendors coming to Los Gatos. So, yeah, I think that's a good one.
I heard it mentioned, but I wasn't clear. Does this also include door-to-door solicitation, or is that separate?
The town's current ordinance addresses door-to-door solicitation, and it is in compliance with state law. And then the only changes made by the state recently have been to street vendors who sell goods or food on public right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So a question for staff, and it may even be for Ms. Wren, I'm not quite sure. But my question is, if we allow street vending, because I think I heard Council Moore like the idea of it, I'm not sure I do. I think it would take business away from our existing businesses, and that would concern me. So as I look to Ms. Wren, would you have any input on that?
So I think there's two sides of that, right? It's bringing new and different things in, and then the other side is you have someone who's paid $10,000 for their CUP and have set up the kitchen. So I think from my perspective, it's really a matter of us being in compliance with what state law is and being able to have those laws and follow them. We still try to move folks in the direction of a special event permit or an encroachment permit, just out of respect for the businesses that are around, but we do have to also honor what the state is requiring.
Thank you, Ms. Wren.
Councilmember Moore.
And just a quick question for the town attorney on that topic. My understanding is that new state law pretty much decriminalizes and pretty much allows street vending. Is that right?
We can issue civil citation, or the state law allows public entities to issue administrative civil citations for violations of whatever ordinance is in place. but it has done away with the ability to issue criminal citations, which is the equivalent. That's like it's an infraction. It's the equivalent of like a traffic ticket where they pay a fine.
Got it. Okay, then it does sound like something that we probably have to talk through and address in an ordinance.
Vice Mayor Hudas.
Are there hygiene requirements? Because I know some cities have had, tremendous amount of street vending, and then they've had problems with hygiene, and they've pulled back and they've started to regulate. And would looking at this include looking at the hygiene requirements?
Yes, and I haven't spent that much time on it to date, and so I'm not familiar with what those health requirements are. But whatever we adopt would need to conform with the state law.
Very good. Any other questions, comments on this ordinance, proposed ordinance? The fourth one, Attorney Whelan?
Okay, and then the fourth one is an amendment to the town's organic waste ordinance, and that was recommended by the town's solid waste JPA, and it was recommended to bring the town again into compliance with state law. And I have been working on that one already because that's required to remain a member of the solid waste JPA. And the main change that's being proposed there is to have more specific provisions about construction and demolition debris, like what happens with it, who's allowed to handle it. And then the other changes are how to address overages, people who overfill their bins. And then to be more specific about who's responsible for enforcing the ordinance.
Questions, comments? Councilmember Risto?
Thank you. I mean, this sounds like something we have to address. This is required of us. Can I ask why you placed it 4 out of these? I guess since you've gone through these before we go into others or making suggestions, I would be interested in understanding, is it phased because of how long each one will take? Is it phased because of, well, we're getting along and we just need to catch up? Or
I think I ordered it in terms of complexity.
Okay.
And so I would say it's in a descending order of complexity.
So a higher chance of moving through the list?
It's a low-hanging fruit for sure, the solid waste ordinance.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, thank you.
Okay, with that, then where would you place SB 9 if it was the will of the council to add that? Where would you place it as a priority as far as complexity?
I haven't seen the proposed amendment, but it sounds like it's not incredibly complex. And also, planning would be taking the laboring, or I would be helping planning with that ordinance amendment. So I can see what the community development director thinks about that.
Thank you. Yes, we think this is going to be a more simple effort than some of our other efforts.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Moore.
And I'm just going to say on that, because there's that one might be worthy of prioritizing towards the top because there are current, people that want to do things to their homes that the town is currently not allowing them to do. So I think it would make sense to address that one sooner than later.
Councilmember Risto?
Yeah, unless there was input from the town attorney differently, I would put that one at the top as well in terms of it sounds like it's not complex and it sounds like it would address an issue that is hanging up some development opportunities, and there are applications. And in terms of working on our housing element, this just seems like another way to show that we're trying to make something, looking at the whole proposal of what they're asking, it sounds like this change would still allow us to effectively have what we asked for, and allow a homeowner to have something. So I would put this at the top personally.
Mayor Badami.
So I would look at, is this a time for us to make motions? And
Yes.
should we make individual motions? Because we might not all be in agreement which one we want, number 1 or number 2. I would recommend, unless staff says otherwise, that we immediately take a motion if we want SB 9 to be the number 1 on the list. So I'm sorry.
I have one question. Does anyone have other ordinances they wanted to
Thank
add
you.
before we start ordering them? Because I did have a thought along those lines. If I can continue then, or unless we wanted to, does that make sense
No,
for the
no,
council?
I think we should hear for any potential new ordinances now.
In case, Vice Mayor comes up with one and we all go, oh, no, that should be first.
Yes.
I don't want to order them until I know all of them. Given that we have an implementation program in our general plan for discouraging artificial turf and potentially dealing with that, I don't know if staff can give me some feedback on whether it makes sense to look at an artificial turf ban this year or later on. I don't know if there's will to look at it at all, but given that we have some implementation programs, can you talk to me about what we would be looking at versus a ban and versus whether this makes sense?
So I would probably want to research what we have the ability to prohibit. I haven't looked into that at this time. So perhaps what we could do is the council could request that I provide information on the town's ability to prohibit artificial turf entirely.
Okay, I would be interested in that. I don't know whether the council would want to ultimately do that, but I think it's something I would like to look at, assuming there's other council members interested. That was the only other ordinance I wanted to potentially add.
Councilmember Moore?
Thank you. So I was curious from a sort of, I don't know if this is a process question or what, but last year we had this list of 14 or 15 ordinances, and it seems like there are some that sort of fell off. And so I'm kind of wondering maybe on like a few that I was particularly interested in where those ended up. So we have the water efficient landscape ordinance, and that was about compliance with state law from my understanding. There was also last year we had talked about a parking space requirements ordinance. I'm interested how that might work or not, if that has to be separate, if we're, because we've been having that conversation in terms of housing element implementation. So I'm curious where that landed. And then the other one that I think is really important that I actually hear a lot from people on, especially with the storms, is the wireless facilities ordinance and allowing for, wireless companies to, do stuff in the right of way. And so kind of where those have landed, because I think those are still things that I would be interested in.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just a matter of capacity. So the water ordinance, the town probably should be working on that. And then the parking, I think it'll be a matter of having like a study done to see how much parking is recommended for different uses. But I'm definitely open to working on that ordinance once we have that information. And then the wireless facilities, we had some discussions with one mobile carrier provider, and I was interested in hiring outside counsel to prepare the ordinance because it's very involved. And I broached the subject of that particular applicant paying the cost. They weren't interested in doing that. But I do think it's legally justifiable for the town to go ahead and retain the outside counsel and then fold the cost of that into the permits that are issued to the various wireless providers. And so that is a project that I'd be comfortable adding back onto the list.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. So it sounds like maybe for this year, adding the wireless facilities and the water efficient landscape on could make sense. I'm hearing the parking requirement we might address kind of through other work. And so I think that maybe isn't as urgent, but especially because water efficient is kind of a state law question. And then wireless facilities, I think that's just, I don't know about the rest of the council, but whenever we have the storms especially, I get a lot of emails from people in the hillsides and things about their connectivity. And I think that's like kind of a basic, I don't know. I think that's something that's, if there's something that we could do to do better there, I think that's definitely worth looking into. So, yeah, I would support adding both of those. And it sounds like, from a capacity standpoint, maybe we're leaning towards taking off or putting at the very bottom free speech. So my thoughts there.
Very good. Councilmember Rennie.
So I'll just give you my thoughts on the order. I would put SB 9 first because it's simple and it is kind of holding up some people. Two of them you have listed, the third and the fourth you have listed as compliance with state law. To me, that needs to occur right away so that we're compliant with state law. I'm assuming we have trouble enforcing anything that doesn't comply with state law. And then I would put after those, the number one, which was the sign ordinance, and then the water efficiency use, and then the wireless facilities one that's mentioned.
Thoughts, Councilmember Risto?
Thank you. I agree with wanting to be in compliance with state law. What I'm wondering is, for the ones where we're not, is it just state law rules and our laws are outdated and so we just don't enforce them?
Anything that's not in conformance with state law would be preempted. But it'll aid staff because we do get a lot of calls about street vendors, and so having something codified will help staff.
Okay, that makes sense to me in getting those through. The one I'm concerned about is the content neutral language for the signs, because we have so many signs all over the place and it's only going to increase. If we don't address that, we just can't enforce anything about signs. Or where are we with that? You know, if somebody has a for sale sign versus a vote for me sign versus whatever, do we have anything that we can enforce about signs right now?
The town is enforcing its existing sign ordinance. The current ordinance is not explicit about what's permitted in the public right-of-way. And so one facet of the amendment is to take care of that gray area. And then with regard to the content neutrality issue, that will become an issue if and when the town's ordinance is challenged. So it's really more of like a proactive effort to stave off any challenge to the town's existing ordinance.
Okay, and to follow up then, so that part, the content neutral, would then apply to if we make a rule about a sign and say, we can't say this kind of sign can be here and that kind of sign can't be there. But if we decided as a body that we didn't want any signs in the public right of way, that could be done pretty easily.
Yes.
So we could bifurcate the process there.
Yes, and I mean, the proposed changes they're not overly dramatic. Just instead of talking about the content of what's on the sign, you know, what I'm proposing is that instead the ordinance address the user of the sign. Like right now there's language that talks about what construction signs can say. And so instead of that, the proposal would be, you know, a construction company can put up a sign of such and such a size, but not talk about what can be on that sign.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not sure if I want to move that to the so far down then, but I don't have strong feelings. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. So kind of going off the last two comments. So it sounds like there's maybe some consensus around SB 9 being first. Maybe peddler could go 2 still, like Councilmember Rennie said. Signs, maybe we move up to 3 and switch with organic waste. So 3 would be the sign ordinance, 4 is organic waste, 5 is wireless, and 6, did you keep water efficient landscape on there or no?
Yes.
Okay, and then 6 is water efficient landscape. And then my thought on free speech is it does sound like we need, you know, some more information there. So maybe that's not prioritized as an ordinance right now, but maybe an information item for council to kind of look at and then decide if we want to add it to the ordinances and maybe kick something else off. Yeah.
And before a formal motion is made, artificial turf ban? Any thoughts on that, Vice Mayor?
Well, I believe SB 676 is new. I think it might be better to wait and see what other municipalities do with SB 676 before we put effort into that. I'm also really concerned about doing something on artificial turf where we're asking private individuals to do something that the town and the schools haven't done. So I would, I just don't think that's really equitable to do that. So I think that, we did a little bit of that with, I think, our fence ordinance at one point, and it just doesn't sit well. So I think it'd be better to wait a bit on that and see what other municipalities are doing.
Very good. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not at all sort of opposed to the idea of banning or altering how we allow turf, but I think my sense is that that'll kind of get hashed out as we continue to talk about Creekside. I think that's kind of our big turf question, and so maybe once we make some decisions there, which I think are bigger than even if we like turf or not. I think there's funding questions there and use questions. And so I think maybe once we address that, we could, we still have environmental sustainability as a strategic priority, so that still exists. So I think, I think, but I agree with kind of what Councilmember Hewitt was saying. I definitely don't want to make people rip up turf and things, so especially not on private property, so.
Very good. So any other comments or questions? I think we're close to a motion here.
Yes, I was interested. Both Councilmember Rennie and Councilmember Moore had itemized 6 items. So I would say if one of the two of them wanted to repeat their priorities, Councilmember Rennie, you were the first one to come up with the list. Otherwise, I'm happy. I wrote them down.
I'm happy to go with Councilmember Moore's order.
Okay.
I can make that motion, which was number 1, SB 9, number 2 was the peddler, and then sign was 4, and then three, sorry, and then organic waste was 4, and you said wireless 5 and water 6.
Yes.
Second.
Yes.
So we would call the question. All in favor?
It's your floor, Mayor.
I don't know. All right, I'll take this one on.
Aye.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. All right, back at you,
Very
Dr.
good.
Spano.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 3, which is a review of the strategic priorities from last year. And in your packet, you have as the list of those priorities, which is attachment 1. And to get us started, also, I will also refer to attachment 2 that Town Manager Prevetti walked through in terms of the Los Gatos at a glance, the core goals. Those can also be under review here if you have any questions. But before we get into council discussing asking any questions or wanting any information about the status of the priorities, let's take a quick look at attachment 3, which is the iceberg model. The iceberg model of municipal work, and it's attachment 3 in your packet. And so just briefly, and I know that was described in the staff report, but this really does set up the framework for your strategic priorities. And this model is well known within the local government industry. John Nalbandian is the author of this. The iceberg model says that 10% of the town's work is above the water line, and that includes the vision for the town's future. So council, the governing body, sets the strategic priorities, the policy direction, and the budget adoption. That constitutes, so what are those strategic priorities? council's judgment based on their judgment and what they hear from constituents and what they see. These rise to the level beyond the routine work of the city. They're special. They're called out as being special because of immediate need, because of a community concern, or whatever is motivating that. And that is really council's ability to set the direction and the vision for the community through those special strategic priorities. 90% of the work of local government occurs below the water line. This is the everyday routine service delivery that your staff provides to the community. And the governing body doesn't really make a lot of decisions around that routine work that falls to the town manager, except as part of approving the annual budget, the budget adoption. So you resource that service delivery. It's very important that the relationship between the two. If a strategic priority comes off the list, it's not like it doesn't happen or we're not going to work on it. If you're successful in achieving the strategic priority, it falls below the water line and now becomes integrated into the everyday work of the staff, and it becomes part of the operating budget. So what we're focused on here, obviously, is what's above the water line, and recognizing the limited capacity, that you don't want to overload what's above the water line and then diminish the ability to deliver the everyday services. So it's a very delicate dance and balancing act that needs to be enacted. With that said, then, we are focused here this evening on the above the water line, and so we can now open the discussion to any questions, comments you have about the strategic priorities from last year. And again, I'll direct your attention to attachment 1, which lists those priorities, and then you can also look at attachment 2. Is it attachment? Yes, attachment 2 in terms of the core goals. So this is just your opportunity to ask about the status of those priorities, and if you have any questions, comments for staff or for each other. And if you're fine with the priorities from before, we can certainly move forward and make some decisions about the priorities for the 2024-2026. Councilmember Moore?
I was just going to kind of jump there, and I don't mean to jump out of order, but I think that the 2024-2026 draft priorities do make sense. I think they do sort of synthesize what we've accomplished. I really appreciate kind of the iceberg model and what the town manager shared about something like community policing really becoming part of the police department. And I think that, I think when I last year, when I felt like something was coming off of this, it felt like it was becoming less of a priority, and now it's sort of the opposite, that it's really becoming part of the core of the town. And so I'll just kind of emphasize a few that I wanted to emphasize. When it comes to safety, I think continuing to do more on emergency preparedness is always incredibly important. I think we've been able to invest in, last year we were able to invest a significant amount of capital into that, and I'd like to continue to see us do that. I think the fact that we were able to bring on an emergency coordinator is a huge, huge win, and someone with kind of the level of expertise that we brought onto the team is really great. The taking off affordable housing implementation, proactively work with affordable housing partners, I think makes sense because that's becoming part of the housing element. I am curious kind of how we plan to, if there's kind of a timeline on that, if we're, as the housing elements implemented. I wrote down on environmental sustainability, I do think that artificial turf kind of gets addressed here. I think that we need to really look at that. I think that's worth looking at, and along with a number of other environmental things. And yeah, that's all. Oh, and then jumping over to traffic safety improvements, again, I think that's a great priority that we added last year, the traffic calming safety for all users. I think we're continuing to try to do more on that. I think our kind of preliminary capital budget shows that. And then I'm really glad to see that we're keeping, or that we still have DEI on here, because DEI is an ongoing effort. It's just because we created the commission, I think that is all the more reason to continue doing more work in that area. And so I really like the draft plan. I don't have a whole lot of issues.
Very good. Thank you, Council Member. And so we are now on attachment 4 that Council Member Moore has moved us towards, and Vice Mayor Hudas.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any major shift to what's on this page. I have a few things that I think maybe have moved, maybe they've moved into the below the line. And maybe we need to adjust the wording, even though the topic is still important. So the first one I would talk about is the implementation of the ad hoc wildfire mitigation plan. That plan is several years old now, and I think we are well on our way toward implementation. So I would suggest that we look at moving ad hoc wildfire mitigation to the next step by looking at where we go next with wildfire mitigation, rather than just dwell on the plan that we put together several years ago. In that vein, I think with regard to the, and I think we've all cited the senior roadmap, so the community vitality, where older adults thrive. I think that's all valid, and I think we need to implement the senior roadmap. But I would add 2 twists to that maybe are a little more specific. So I think for the work that the Community Health and Senior Services Commission is, and that is to measure progress on the senior roadmap. And I'm going to suggest that one of the senior roadmap goals, the one that is probably the most difficult and the most long-term and challenging, that we start to articulate that specifically. So I'm going to suggest that we work toward the establishment of an intergenerational community center with some dedicated space for older adults. I had some others that are probably not as important as those 2.
Councilmember Rennie.
So I, sort of in the same vein of pruning things that we are not really working on, for the economic vitality, this is one that was really important to me many years ago, and I feel like we've made a lot of strides on it. We still have policies and ordinances, but I don't think I saw really any ordinances that really address this, and are we working on any policies? And so the question in my mind is, should these be on there? We're talking about streamlining permit processes also as part of economic vitality. I think we may still be thinking of some streamlining. So I guess my question maybe is for staff is, do these really need to be on here? They don't seem like we're giving them that much attention, or there's that much work, or maybe one of those bullets removed, or maybe both.
Thank you for the question. Last year, actually, Council made great strides when it essentially codified the economic vitality resolution that was in place during the pandemic. And by codifying, that actually enabled quite a bit of streamlining to occur in our permitting process. So that was a huge accomplishment last year. And one of the things that we find as our economic vitality manager and community development department continue to work with new businesses and existing businesses, there is always room for improvement. So if it's easier, we're happy to, in a sense, streamline that item so that it is streamlining the permit process and associated ordinances. So that way it's clear that what we're really looking at is how we, again, continuously improve and adapt our policies and ordinances to the changing needs of our economy.
And so the real question, I think, is this idea that some things move into the below the line work and they don't need the extra attention anymore. And I'm, kind of questioning that. This last year's priorities had more stuff on it, I think, than I've seen in any of the ones in the 10 years that I've been here. And so we've trimmed a little bit, and Councilmember Hudis, I think, offered another one to trim. And so again, I'm looking at, when you have too much stuff, it's not really a priority, right? If you get down to smaller numbers of things, you really do have priorities. So that's why I'm really questioning, should this be here, or are we ready to move it below the line? And maybe that's a question for council members, or maybe staff has an opinion on that.
Yeah, and certainly open to what your colleagues have to say as well. I think our experience with streamlining is that it takes a fair amount of political will, that it is something that is going to need council level attention. And again, our policy committee is starting to work on its work plan, obviously with the housing element and its implementation. That's going to be taking up a considerable amount of our community development time. But it is important that we keep in mind that there is room for improvement in our processes. I wouldn't say that it's yet below the waterline from my perspective. I'm certainly open to what my colleagues, on the staff, and I want to just acknowledge and recognize the hard work of all the staff, and they're here to really help you with this. But from our perspective, this is going to need continual attention. And while we didn't identify a specific ordinance tonight, we never know what might pop up during the course of the year. So. But we're happy to wordsmith it so that it's a tighter item on the list. So again, you will see that we are interested in sharing your notion of let's focus on the things that are most important.
So what I'm hearing is go ahead and get rid of policy and ordinances and leave a bullet that says streamlining.
Very good. Mayor Badami and then Vice Mayor Hudis.
Yeah, a couple comments. I might get some opposition on this, but I tend to be common sense and figure out what's practical. But when we put a community shuttle or keep that on there, are we working on that? I just don't see that happening in the next 2 years. I think that it would be better suited maybe after the North 40 gets developed and we've got this need, to have more, a better transportation throughout the town. But to me, I don't think it adds anything to put it on there right now. I don't see any opposition. I thought I might get some, but so in streamlining the list, maybe we could eliminate that. I did have a couple of other comments, and I did notice that in prior strategic priorities, and I'm looking at the one from 2020 through 2022, we also included our core goals on the document. We don't do that anymore. And those core goals, community character, good governance, fiscal stability, quality public infrastructure, civic enrichment, and public safety, I think it's important if we could still keep that on there. And one of the reasons I like that on there is it addressed community character. So as we move forward in the next 2 years, we have a lot of housing units. We're going to have big growth throughout Los Gatos, and we are getting people that are concerned about what it might do to their neighborhood. And we know that there's going to be times where we can't please everybody. So I hate the idea of adding something, but I would like us to consider under land use planning if we could be a little bit specific and maybe add implement policies that support a land use mix and density that reflect the values of the community. And so with that and tying into our core goals of community character, that is supported by one of our attachments that we have here, and that is preservation of our historic neighborhoods and enhancing and our our neighborhoods. And I'm not getting the exact wording right, but it's listed on one of these attachments. But I think it would be important to add that at this particular time as we go forward in growth. And now I have the attachment. It's page 2 on attachment number 2. And it talks about preserve and enhance the town's historic resources and small town character. So I think if we could add that in there, it might tie that into the core value that I also would like to have listed on the document.
Mayor Badami, could you repeat the proposed addition under land use planning? You worded that, implement.
I did. Implement policies that support a land use mix and density that reflect the values of the community.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hudas?
Thank you. I have something related to that, and I don't know whether it fits under that as something more specific. But we opened up by talking about the things we felt good about. I think probably all of us are not feeling so good about where we are with the housing element and 9 or 11 builder's remedy applications. And that's what I hear from about constituents a lot. And so it seems as though there's something, people say, is there anything we can do about it? And, obviously there's state law where these applications, when they're deemed complete, they vest in certain, but some of these will drop out. Some of them have already dropped out. And so what do we do there? Along the lines of the general statement was, and I felt that there was something we could do that we haven't done, and that is to develop some objective standards, because those come into play on SB 35, SB 330, the Housing Accountability Act. And we did some work on objective standards, but I would call them tape measure standards. They were all things that you could measure with a tape measure, but there were other ones that other communities have done, and we brought this up and discussed this with Ms. Gatos at our study session. And some of those had to do with hillside views, architectural style, architectural building design, historic significance, transition between neighborhoods, and these were all objective standards that exist in other municipalities. And I brought forward about 6 or 7 different municipalities and some examples of objective standards that address that. And so I think that one of the things we can do is to develop do some more work on our objective standards. And so I'm going to suggest that as sort of maybe it fits under Mayor Badami's suggestion, but it's along those lines.
Okay. And to add that in to the document as a strategic priority.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. So there's been a lot of good discussion. I first want to thank staff for providing this draft 2024-2026 strategic priorities, because as I was looking through what we had, I was trying to think which things go below the line. It was like, oh, you've done that. And so, looking back and forth, there was nothing that came off that I thought should have stayed on. And this is for 2 years. One of the things I was thinking about is, I appreciate that we are continuing work that was started. We're not throwing anything out that a lot of time and effort has gone into. I don't like it when I've seen years ago, sometimes work gets started and then council changes direction or anything. So I'm glad we're all going in the same direction. When I look at this, I had a question about the community shuttle. I thought there was a program where something gets paid into it, but I don't see us doing any active work toward it. Is there anything that's been done in the last 2 years tangible about the community shuttle that would compel me to want to keep it on the list, or is this something that isn't really happening?
Thanks for that question. We have in Parks and Public Works been chipping away at that as we have resources available, and we have been talking with a variety of firms, like via organizations that might be able to support that kind of service. We haven't been working on it in the traditional sense of like shuttle from point A to point B. It's been more of ride sharing services, which is kind of the current trend in that industry. So we've been working at it very slowly, I would say.
Okay, so I guess my next question would be, because I understand, Complete Streets and Transportation Commission was getting reports on that and talking about it. If that came off of our strategic priorities, what would the implication of that be? Would that work just stop, or is that a priority of a commission? Or because I think we all know that ultimately I thought we all wanted something along those lines. I don't want to have something on here that doesn't make a difference, but if taking it off changes the direction, that might not be a great thing.
It would change the direction if you took it off. Just to be blunt about it, we have quite a number of transportation demand management options that we do talk with prospective developers about, but if they see that a community shuttle is on the strategic priorities, it can make a difference in terms of those communications with developers.
Okay, so with that information, I would want to keep the community shuttle on here. When I was thinking about the housing element certification, my first thought was, well, that should just drop off because we should be done with that soon enough. However, the fact that it was added and implementation, I think the implementation of the housing element is actually going to be more work than getting the housing element. So I think those staying together makes sense. Under economic vitality, I wouldn't necessarily want to take policy and ordinances out. I mean, I even view the peddler ordinance is falling under that, and we don't know what laws will come up, and so we're never done. But I think putting it as a strategic priority indicates that we really do want to address things. If something comes up, if it could increase economic vitality, we do want that to be a strategic priority, not, oh, we're good enough, let's just let it go. So I would actually be in favor of keeping those 2 bullet points under economic vitality. And then given that we have a DEI plan and a commission, initially I thought, well, that could start to go below the line, but I don't think it does because there's been 1 or 2 meetings. And so I think for the next 2 years, it makes a lot of sense to keep that item on here. I personally had nothing to add. I think less is more. I think all of this addresses, what our community needs. It hits all the core areas, and it's an incredible amount of work under each of these. So I wouldn't be in favor of adding anything.
Very good. Vice Mayor?
A couple of suggestions of words that might come off along those lines. So I'm wondering, well, maybe for discussion, do we really need to call out pandemic recovery? We're really talking about sustaining growth, economic vitality, and maybe just leave it at that, or sustaining growth.
And we did take it off
of the
24-26.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong one. Okay.
Yeah, attachment 4 does not reference the pandemic.
Okay, great. And the other one, just in terms of eliminating some words that maybe things are, kind of underway already, I'm sorry, I'm still on the wrong one. I was talking about SB 9. It sounds like we have an ordinance, and so it's no longer a use. So that's fine. Yeah.
Very good. Mayor?
Thank you. So I see some of this as being a wish list, but, so be it. I want to take a look at the financial management where we have address pension and OPEB obligations, which we've had on this strategic priority for years. What does address mean? And when I look at, again, the strategic priorities from 2020 through 2022, at least there was some bullet points underneath it, which was additional discretionary payments, reduced amortization strategies, and pension contribution management strategies. So should we be a little bit more specific, maybe have some metrics? Because what good is it? It's almost, I hate to use the word salad, but I just wonder if we could do better with, I know we can't, I wish we could do more metrics. It's really important that we have metrics, and that way we know that we've accomplished something. So next year when we invite Dr. Spano back and he says, what are your greatest accomplishments? Well, we can say, geez, we did a whole lot. So I'm kind of concerned with some of these items. And again, with the financial management, what are we doing about it? We just keep it on there for years and never really address it? What does address mean? And then two, there's been some meetings with the Finance Commission. Do we really have a forecasted structural deficit? Well, we don't really know that now. And if anybody watched the Finance Commission meeting last night, we may not. So do we need to have that on there? Can that be eliminated? Looking to my fellow council members for comments.
Vice Mayor Hudas?
Yeah, having been there last night working on this, I think we have made some progress. But I do think that there's still work to be done on the 5-year operating forecast. The word cure forecasted structural deficit, I don't think I think it's too specific to what they're dealing with now. And so I think that could be removed as long as we have structurally balanced and sustainable operating forecast in the title. So I think it's probably covered. But regarding the metrics, I think that taking a step forward toward a council scorecard of metrics, something that the Finance Commission, I think, is ready to roll up their sleeves and work on, and I think it's also important, and I would also strongly compliment staff on preparing the at a glance by the numbers. I think that's a great way to start that. The scorecard would go to the future a bit. So it would look at taking these strategic priorities and, saying how are they measurable, and then taking that and saying, well, what are the very few metrics that we would actually look at? And so I would add that, I would remove the structural deficit to the financial management.
Councilmember Risto?
Thank you. Yeah, looking at that, I would say that under, develop a 5-year structurally balanced and sustainable operation or operating forecast, I think to me that says enough. In terms of calling out what the strategies are, maybe we remove those, and as the year works on, we don't necessarily have to say we're going to explore new revenue opportunities because we don't know if we are or not. And I think the term was pushed by the Finance Committee or Commission a couple of years ago for the forecasted structural deficit, and we adopted their language. So instead of getting into who said it or whatever, take that out with the idea that if we're going to develop a structurally balanced and sustainable operating forecast, that includes dealing with whatever we have to deal with, if people are going to be sensitive about the words they used. And something else. Personally, I don't feel like we need metrics on this page. I think we need metrics behind it. So the idea of some type of scorecard makes sense, not on our list of priorities, but behind it. And then I'd be curious to know from staff's perspective, I think we all seeing how many projects are going to be coming forward as our housing element unfolds and as we start to get the housing that we are supposed to be encouraging. I think everybody would like to wrap their arms around stronger objective standards. The question I have is, it was a lot of work from staff and through the Planning Commission and the council to get to where we are. So what does revisiting that mean? And how much staff time would that take? And how quickly could something like that even be done? I mean, if we started it and it took 2 years and all our applications come in before then, is it worth the effort or the diversion? Or is this something that, if we put that on there, does something else have to come off?
Well, again, as you're mentioning, we did a lot of work on objective standards, and by state law, they had to be measurable. They had to be yardstick type standards. We're happy to add additional objective standards that address hillside views and other qualities of the Los Gatos community. Quite honestly, we're going to have to balance the interest of doing objective standards with housing element implementation. And we're going to be under the gun to perform on the implementation programs and the housing element within the timeframes that we've identified. So it's the same staff doing both. So we would have to really figure out how we could squeeze in additional objective standards, and it would take work because those are going to be probably more qualitative, and I don't know if they would be completed in time for the applications that are currently pending. So just to, I think it's great to add it. It would be wonderful for the town to have those, but I know we struggled even the first round to try and figure out, because we knew these quality of life elements were so important to the council and to our community, but they're not easily accomplished as objective standards. We're certainly willing to give it a try, but we have just the same team that's also working to get the housing element done and to get those key implementation pieces accomplished.
Okay, thank you. It was, if I can just give a little story, it was interesting. I think 2 other council members were in Monterey, and there was a discussion of land use and objective standards. And the example they used was, he threw it out there, he said, figure skating is not a sport, football is. And he said, from his perspective, because a sport would have objective standards, and anyone watching a football game can see when the ball moves and what yard line it's on. Anyone watching figure skating, you have to be a specialized judge to make a decision about who did better in figure skating. And so he said that's sort of, how you define objective standards. So I feel like there may be a way to get to architecture or other things, but I think that kind of work to get there is going to be so Herculean. I'm not saying it's not worth it, but I'm very hesitant at this point, given where we are with our implementation programs. I mean, the minute we are certified, we have hundreds of implementation programs. So I'm not ready to prioritize that or put that on the list yet, unless I hear a compelling argument. And I understand the community's desire. I also feel like no matter how much we have objective standards, state laws may still allow somebody to have a 7-story building. So with density bonus and other things, there's waivers. And so we cannot control all of this as much as we'd like to.
Very good. Vice Mayor Hudis and then Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, I mean, I realize that this council is probably split on this issue. But with all of the implementation work that we have, essentially that implementation work is to comply and results in more housing. We have currently pre-applications or applications for 1,300 units against the 1,993 that were required over 8 years. And we have far and away more builder's remedy than any city of our size. And so we're dealing with something that's a little bit different. And I think that, we explored with Ms. Couts a number of these, and she kind of gave a thumbs up on some and a thumbs down on others. And I think we ought to start with that advice and with the experience of some other communities that have successfully implemented objective standards. I ended up actually voting against our objective standards last time because I thought they were really incomplete, and some of these issues were raised over 3 years ago, and we did not make any progress on them, and that has allowed some things to happen. Now, of course, these applications, they vest in whatever's in place at the time, but this is for the ones really that drop out and we haven't seen yet. And I think it's really critical that we continue to work on this, even if there are some other things that we don't work on, because I don't think we can, look our residents in the eye and said we did everything we could if we haven't really made an effort on improving our objective standards.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. So I think there's been a lot of things proposed here tonight, so I think we need to try to start working through some of what the proposals are. But so on that one, I think the Vice Mayor is probably right that the council is somewhat split on at least some of these objective standards. So I think before this became an objective or a strategic priority, it might make sense at the discretion of the mayor to bring the topic forward to see what objective standards we're interested in looking at. I think things like, views are hard because you have, people, the state has said people don't have a right to their view, and because of density bonus and all these things, there are, I don't know how, meritorious or not that would be. So I think I'd be interested in the topic, but I don't know if it makes sense to put it here as a strategic priority. And then a few other things on here. I guess we can keep talking about that and then we can go through some of the other ones, but I'll leave it there.
Very good. Mayor Bidham, go ahead.
It just as a little pause, I think we might be at a point where we may want some motions perhaps on some of these elements. So for example, I think the mayor asked that we add back in the core goals. I mean, that could be a simple motion just to get us rolling.
I was going there right after Councilmember Moore spoke. I thought I'm ready to start making some motions and move through here. So I'm going to start with that one. If we could go back to adding the core goals, the itemized core goals, as we did back in 2020, 2022, which was just right underneath the heading. So that's my motion, my first motion.
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So I'm going to go through these 4 categories. It seems the last one is where we had some contention and opposition. But as far as safety goes, I think we all were in consensus with the draft in attachment 4. I just had one question, and that was the Vice Mayor had a different wording for implementation of the ad hoc wildfire mitigation plan. It had something to do with the next step. Could you refine that for us? Because I would like to take a motion, because I think we all were in agreement otherwise on the safety element.
Okay, I would move to, I don't know if we've disbanded that group or not. So I would move to activate the wildfire safety group to recommend next steps in wildfire protection.
If I may, Mayor, the group did a lot of hard work and made specific recommendations in the plan. So now we're actively trying to actually implement those recommendations. So we still have a fair amount of work to do associated with the hard work that those individuals put in. So if we activate them, then that is telling them, okay, we're not going to do all the recommendations you gave us before. So At least that's how I interpret it, and I apologize if that wasn't the intent.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, it was certainly not the intent. I think the intent was that a number of the recommendations have been accomplished. A number are underway below the line, but we need to keep moving forward. And so there were, I've heard, here's an example. So a lot of work has been done to improve the communications in one neighborhood. So what are their recommendations to take that and move that to other hillside, very high fire hazard zone neighborhoods? I know that they were very concerned about the method of funding and continuing to do abatement, and they had some ideas about how to move that forward. At the very least, I'd like to bring back some of those and have them talk to us about their assessment of how far we've gotten and what we should be considering to do next, because I don't think we can stop on this topic.
So if I may, Mayor and Vice Mayor, perhaps the rewording is, instead of implementation, it's advance and activate ad hoc wildfire action items. I think it's really about how do we activate it and advance these efforts.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, so I like that wording, so I'm going to call the question.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Okay, so we can move on to the next category, which is traffic and transportation. I heard a lot of consensus on that, so I would move to approve the traffic transportation priorities per attachment 4.
Second.
Second. Any comments? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. We'll move on to prudent financial management. And I heard...
I'm sorry to interrupt. So does that mean community shuttle stays?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
All right, prudent financial management. I heard 2 other council members, in which I'm in agreement with them, which is to remove, explore new revenue opportunities, and remove, cure forecasted structural deficit. So with the removal of those 2, I would move to approve the prudent financial management strategic priorities, knowing that the metrics will come at a later date. Do I have a second? Councilmember Rennie.
Second.
Any comments? Councilmember Moore has a question.
Thank you. Yeah, just a question of staff. So does that, I mean, I think the jury's, I guess we're kind of saying the jury's still out on our structural deficit here. Does removing those 2 sub-bullets fundamentally change any work the town is doing, or just kind of streamline this goal?
Well, we're preparing for our next council meeting where we will be talking about our 5-year forecast. Council did direct us to come back on the 20th to talk about revenue measures. So, we are following council direction, and those will be on your agenda for next week. I think the important piece is the higher level bullet that is remaining: develop a 5-year structurally balanced and sustainable operating forecast. So that gives us a lot of room. So I'm not concerned with dropping them. However, I look to my team in case there's another opinion.
I agree with your assessment. Thank you.
Are you good with
Okay,
that, Councilmember Moore?
absolutely.
Councilmember Ristow?
Yeah, I'll be able to support it, given that taking those bullet points off doesn't mean that we're stopping something that we've started exploring or talking about. It's just under developing a 5-year budget for over our next 2 years of 2024 to 2026. We're not calling out specific strategies. There are other strategies, and we're not stopping what we started. So I can support this.
Vice Mayor Hudes?
There was one additional item that I suggested there. I don't know if Mr. Spano captured that, but it was related to the council scorecard?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And I believe that you mentioned that, Mayor, under metrics, and that would be in a separate document that would include the scorecard. And I would also add that under explore new revenue opportunities and structural deficit, those, it sounds like those are coming off, but you will have metrics underneath the higher level bullet there. 5-year structurally balanced and sustainable operating budget.
I think the metrics, this council scorecard is independent of the operating plan. The operating plan is just one part of that. So do you have some language from before on the council scorecard that we discussed?
I would, it sounded to me, and I again, if I misunderstood, please correct me, that we have the 4 bullets, kind of high-level bullets, and then we would be adding a new high-level bullet called add council scorecard. So it wouldn't be tied to any of the existing bullets. It would be its own standalone, was
Correct.
my understanding.
That's my understanding.
Correct, yeah. So I'd make that motion.
Okay, Councilmember Moore?
I have a question. What is the council scorecard?
Council scorecard are a set of metrics to measure essentially these objectives. So these objectives don't really have metrics associated with them. And if you look at what Matt Mahan has done in San Jose with a council scorecard, it's been a process to set some key performance indicators and be able to report that as to whether we're making progress. And it comes back to the concept of measures that matter. And it ties into the staff report on some metrics on what's been achieved, but then this would sort of turn it and say, what do we want to achieve? And so, and I believe that the Finance Commission is equipped and ready to work on some recommendations to council about what that means.
And if I could just add here, you had mentioned, Vice Mayor, the Los Gatos at a glance as a potential template with the more forward-looking, future-oriented. This is more retrospective.
Yes.
Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I guess what I'm confused about is if that bullet goes under prudent financial management, does that, to me, that implies that the scorecard is all around the finances. I'm wondering, to me, it would make more sense to get through this and then make a separate motion asking for, similar to the report we got, that we have a scorecard going forward that covers other metrics? Or are you restricting the scorecard to the bullet points under prudent financial management?
Well, it's typically a financial management function to collect this kind of information and provide it to an organization. But it's something that would be ingrained in the organization and would not cover only, revenues and collections and things like that, but it would cover other kinds of metrics that relate to the full set of strategic priorities.
Okay.
So
because as I was looking at the metrics that we had, not all of those are going to tie to money. It's like we can't control how many phone calls come in, or we're going to get more phone calls or fewer phone calls or service calls. That's fine. If the metric falls under there, however it gets implemented.
All right.
Go ahead and respond, and then we'll go to Councilmember.
Yeah, I don't want to spend all night on this, but typically what this works is you start with your strategic objectives, and you say, how are we going to measure whether we're making progress on those? And at an executive level, meaning at the council level, we decide on what are the very few measures that are most important. And then we go to, what are the measures that would then cascade down.
Very good.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I just think they don't all tie to finance. So,
Yeah, I
which is
agree.
why I was confused.
Yeah.
But if it wants to rest there and there's other benefits that come besides financial.
I see Councilmember Rennie and Councilmember Moore, and then Mayor Badami.
I just wanted to point out the point of order. We have a motion made by the mayor, seconded by me. We're talking about, well, Mr. Hudis said I'd make that motion. That not even asking for an amendment. So just the point of order is we have a motion and a second, and so far we've had no request for amendments or anything. I just want to keep us on point of order here.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Hudis.
I would request that my motion be an amendment because the motion was for that whole section.
So I would accept the amendment because I was looking for a set of metrics that I thought would come later, but I think you nailed it with the council scorecard, so I accept that amendment. So we have a first, we have a second. I'm going to comments.
Yeah, I've had my hand up for a while.
Yeah, Councilmember Moore.
I'm sorry. We're doing
No,
our
no,
best here.
totally fine. No, I just want to make sure I know what I'm voting on here. I don't like the framing of this as a scorecard. I feel like that's I when looking, just looking up I looked up council scorecard San Jose, and the Matt Mahan's thing comes up, and then a bunch of golf scorecards come up, and so I don't like. And maybe this is like purely a sort of language thing, but I don't like thinking about like the work we're doing as a sort of game. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like we have a lot of. Are there new key performance indicators you're looking for that the town doesn't have already? I'm just not sure why this is a strategic priority rather than something that we're already doing.
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, this is kind of based on very well accepted concepts in American business and government that measurements are important, and what we measure is what we get, and that this enabled the United States to effectively compete with Japan and other countries that were kind of eating into our industrial capability and brought back our car industry, and government then adopted this. I could go on a lot, but I would suggest maybe reading about Balanced Scorecard, reading some articles about it, and I'm happy to provide some as well to the council. It is it is not a game. It's nothing to do with golf, and it's a serious effort that governments all over have done to first of all improve their service to their customers, and secondly, along the way, to engage their employees in the brainstorming and ideas for improvement, and to look at how individual employees within are not told what they need to do, but actually invent ideas that become a way of government improving. I could go on a long time about it, but happy to provide some more information about it.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. So, a question of staff. So, what is your understanding of what this motion does to change how the town runs, or what we're doing, or how we're measuring things?
Well, we measure, we have been measuring a lot of different items. Our adopted budget book and the proposed budget that you'll be getting in April has numerous performance indicators and measurements for each of the departments and each of our programs. And these are measurements that the staff have found useful. In fact, you'll see notes where we have eliminated measures because over time they're no longer useful to us, and instead we replace them. So again, it's a constant evolution of what are our service needs, what do our customers need, how do we measure it? And we measure several things. We measure cycle time, we measure activities, we measure customer satisfaction, And the hardest, of course, is to measure quality, but it's quality that we know our community cares deeply about. So we are fine with the Finance Commission wanting to work on a scorecard. They have not started that work, so we do not know where they're going to go. But even having said that, you know, we're already starting to work on the proposed budget for 24-25. So we are now gathering that data and conducting those customer surveys so that way council has updated information. The other advantage of the performance measures that we have in the budget book is that it's time series. So you can see over time, how well are we doing answering our 911 calls, addressing priority one calls, et cetera. So you can see up and down how it's changed. So, you know, I think the idea of having aspirational goals and trying to measure what those future and forward-looking goals could be is going to be interesting. But I think, you know, in many respects, and that was the intent of attachment 2, is, you know, numbers are part of how we do our business. So I didn't want the council to think that somehow staff was not paying attention to the numbers, because we do. And, you know, if there are new ideas of other things we can measure, we're very open to it. But I would just say, you know, just pulling up the presentation that went to the San Jose City Council, and they had 6 people identified: the chief of staff for the city manager, assistant city manager, 3 deputy city managers, and an assistant to the city manager who put together the scorecard. We do not have that kind of staff. So, you know, we're fine to continue to measure what we can measure, but we do not have the staff capacity. I do not have people I can just say, oh, all you're going to do is measuring, because quite frankly, we're all writing staff reports and standing at the copier and doing the things that need to be done for our community.
Councilmember Ristow.
Point of order. Did the seconder of the motion accept the friendly amendment?
That's where I wanted confirmation from Councilmember Rennie. Did you accept I accepted the friendly amendment from Vice Mayor. Do you accept that as well?
I accept it for discussion purposes.
Okay, all right. So I think it's important that we call the question. So
I still don't know what is the motion? The
motion was to incorporate the prudent financial management on attachment 4 for the draft, and eliminating the 2 bullet points of exploring new revenue opportunities and cure forecasted structural deficit, and add a 5th bullet point of the council scorecard, which is a set of metrics to measure the outcome or the priorities that we have listed. And just to give you an example, you know, we've had address pension and OPEB obligations on here forever. So what results and outcomes were achieved this past year because council put that as a strategic priority? Can you state any?
Are you asking me?
Well, yes, because how did we address it? We don't have anything to address it or measure it by. So how do we know that we're doing our strategic priorities? We're just putting words here. So that's why I'm in favor of metrics, so that we can measure the outcome, and that we're responsible to the residents for making sure that we follow through on these things. Otherwise, we're just, again, it's word salad. Councilmember Ristow.
Okay, so now I'm really confused, because it sounds like the council scorecard that was described is not specific to measuring each of these strategic priorities. It was measuring other things. So if it is...
No, it's...
I guess to the friendly amender.
So I think we start with a topic, and then the council works on it. And I think that the logical next step would be, once we've adopted our priorities, our strategic priorities, to identify the few that we would like to measure that we think are most important, and to add that level, and then to work further down in terms of specific things that might be achieved. But it would be simply to get that ball started, to have a further council direction on how we would measure some of these priorities, and then because they're not all the same. And, for instance, in San Jose, they selected some that I don't think would be appropriate to us, having to do with the absentee property owners and things like that. But we might have some in terms of housing, or we might have some in terms of how we're helping business owners from when they approach the town wanting to open a business until when they're actually able to do that. What is the time that it takes? So this is not something I want to get into tonight. I'm adding it as a suggestion that we have a council scorecard as a priority, and certainly something the scale that San Jose is not what I envision at all.
Councilmember Moore? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify for the record that we are taking motions or taking actions associated with the pension and OPEB obligations. As you know, we have a general fund reserve policy, and with the surplus, we did set aside, council approved the resolution in December to put money into that fund, and then at a future date, the OPEB committee will be making a decision as to whether we pay down another tranche or make an additional discretionary payment. This is a topic that we're trying to get onto the work plan for the Finance Commission. Again, while we didn't include it in the achieving the town's goals, I did make a note that that was something that we could have included in here. So again, there is action happening on the prudent financial management.
Okay, I thank you for bringing that to our attention, Councilmember Moore, and after that, we need to get to a motion or call the question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Understood, thank you. So I'm still just trying to, if it's not like what San Jose is doing, I just don't want for our staff to spend so much time coming up with new metrics for things that are being measured. And so I guess I just still don't totally understand what this looks like as opposed to what San Jose is doing. It looks like San Jose kind of overhauled how they measure things, which I am not. That's why I'm sorry for spending so much time on this, but I am genuinely trying to understand what we're voting on.
I understand. You need to be clear on what you're voting on, and you don't have to vote for it if you're not clear. So we all understand that. Appreciate your input. Councilmember Ristow.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about this and the fact that our staff continues with a small number of people and with vacancies to do the work of the town every single year with a status quo budget and with more and more unfunded mandates coming in, I don't think as a council member it's my job to tell the staff how to do their job. I think, we set the goals, they get done, the town gets taken care of, and I'm not here as a consultant. I'm not trying to micromanage. I think that it would be helpful when information comes before the council, like having this information here, how many calls came in. It's clearly not exhaustive of all of the work that was done. It was a look with the numbers, and I just feel like we would be adding another unfunded mandate on top to measure something when inherently the staff is always trying to be more efficient. So I cannot support adding this.
Okay, I will call the question then. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Passes with Councilmember Moore, Vice Mayor Hudes, Mayor Badami in favor, Councilmember Ristow, Councilmember Moore in opposition. All right, we will move to quality of life, and I'm going to kind of piecemeal this because I heard a lot of different things from different council members. So I am going to piecemeal the community vitality portion of the quality of life, and I would move to approve the 5 bullet points on the quality of life under community vitality. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Risto. Any comments? Councilmember Moore.
Vice Mayor Hudis had proposed some things. So are you?
If it's under community vitality, because I'm piecemealing these.
No, I was confused. I was suggesting modifications on the current that had already been incorporated in this proposed.
Got it.
So I'm okay with this.
Okay.
All right, I'll call the question on the community vitality. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. All right, our next one is economic vitality. I heard some comments that maybe we should remove policies and ordinances. I heard we should keep streamlining the permit process. So I will look to another council member to make the motion on that. Councilmember Ristow.
I move that we keep it the way it is with economic vitality with the 2 bullet points beneath it as written in the draft.
Do I have a second? Vice Mayor.
Second.
All right, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye. No.
Passes, all right, passes 4-1 with Councilmember Rennie opposed. Moving on to land use planning. So I heard that I didn't hear any opposition to 3 of the bullet points: the land use planning with the general plan 2040 implementation, the housing element certification implementation, working with partners to support needs of unhoused residents. There were 2 additions that I heard. One was from the Vice Mayor about working on objective standards, and I had offered implement policies that support a land use mix and density that reflect the values of the community. So I'm going to try a motion that to adopt the land use planning per the attachment 4 draft with the 2 added additions. Do I have a second, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, a second. And to make a couple of comments about it is it's, I think, something that we've lost sight of a bit as we've gotten buried in the details of a housing element and various chapters of a general plan. And I think that it's really important that our community come together on what we would like it to look like, and that, you know, we have these builder's remedy and other things, and this to me would be a way for us to really put together the thinking of the Planning Commission and the council in what do we want our town to really look like, and how would that then translate into other things that we might do. So I think it'd be very helpful as a strategic. It's very strategic. I don't think it's very specific in terms of, you know, amend this or change this, but it would, I think, be really helpful. Considering that we do have different opinions about some of the very specifics that are occurring in town.
Councilmember Moore?
Thank you. So I would like to talk about the objective standards. I just don't know that it is a strategic priority. I feel like for me, I feel like that's an item that I'd like for the council to look at and bring, you know, to kind of talk through. But I see the implementation of the housing element as much more important at this time, because those are, you know, time-bound things. And so I would absolutely support talking about objective standards. I completely agree. I'd like to bring forward some more objective standards too, but I don't know that it makes sense to put that here. I could be convinced otherwise. I am not supportive of the mayor's language. I think that the adding the 6 core goals is great and includes some of the you know, what is the goal, I think, of that new language, but I wouldn't support that language.
Councilmember Ristow?
Thank you. When I look at this, we're talking about strategic priorities for the next 2 years. And while I think the intentions are good, the 2 bullet points are very specific and very time sensitive. If we're talking about projects coming forward right now or talking about objective standards, that's to address a present issue, not over the next 2 years. The other little side note, I know that there's a lot of discussion about the builder's remedy pre-applications, some of which aren't taking advantage of that. They've just cited it. But the other thing is, I do want to remind people, 2 of the builder's remedies at least are going below what we would require for the housing element. So it's not that everything is blowing everything out, and I'm not sure how objective standards would address that. But in terms of the mayor's bullet point, I don't see that that's a strategic priority over the next 2 years. That sounds like a policy or an implementation program. We have a lot of things written into our general plan and our housing element that can address that. And so I'm just seeing it as additional language that doesn't really advance strategic priorities for me. It just doesn't work for me. Thanks.
That's okay. Further comments? Councilmember Rennie?
If I could request the mayor to read that language again, not the objective standard one, but the other one.
Implement policies that support a land use mix and density that reflect the values of the community. And I must tell you that this is something that's on the City of Los Altos' strategic priorities. They felt it was important. I feel that it's important going forward with this explosive housing growth that we're going to have. And since we didn't have our core values even as a consideration of the strategic priorities, I thought we need to tie that in to community character that does talk about preserving our historic resources and our small town character. So Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just say that I would tend to agree with what Councilmember Russo said, that I'm not sure what staff does to implement any of that. I think, it's a very, I don't know what the values are. And it's a big, I don't know what staff does to do that.
Okay, that's okay. Councilmember Rennie.
I think what we used to call it was a mother and apple pie statement, which I don't actually think is going to hurt being in here, so I'll probably vote for it.
All right, so I am going to call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passes 3-2. Vice Mayor Hudes, Councilmember Rennie, Mayor Badami in favor, Councilmember Moore, Councilmember Risto opposed.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So that motion that carried also contained reviewing the objective standards?
Yes, it did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think we've done a pretty good job. Yes?
That concludes everything.
Well, it does, but I want to thank my fellow council members. We had a robust discussion. We didn't always agree, but I think it's important that we all got to have our comments, our priorities. Thank you to staff for putting together a staff report that made it easy, I think, for us to move along. We did our best. Our facilitator, Dr. Spano, thank you so much for facilitating this, and thank you to all who are in attendance. So good night. This meeting's adjourned.